Next, we want to look at the stability of linear time invariant systems. I've spoken about stability before in the context of general discrete systems, and we defined it. I will go back and recap that. But what I want to do now is, if I tell you you've got a linear time invariant system, what can you tell me about that system's stability? And specifically by, again, looking at its impulse response. Can the impulse response tell me something about the stability of a system? In terms of stability, what we looked at before was specifically bounded input, bounded output stability. And what that just means is that if I have some input xn that is limited in some way, it's always less than mx, some maximum value, then there will also be some maximum value which bounds the output. Okay, so if my input is never great, the absolute value of my input is never greater than mx for any of the n's, basically at any time step, then there must be some value which also caps how big the absolute value of my output can be across all n. And that's Bibo stability, bounded input, bounded output stability. So let's look at Bibo stability. So this is specifically bounded input, bounded output stability. Let's look at that in the context of linear time invariant systems. So linear time invariant systems has this property that the output is the convolution of the impulse response of that system with the input. Okay, and that's again what we're going to use in order to study stability. Okay, now let's just think about, we want to place some bounds on the input and the output. So let's just think about what would happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out an equation for the absolute value of the output of the system. Okay, so the absolute value of the output of the system for any LTI system is just the absolute value of my little convolution equation. And what I will do now is I will just write out the terms inside of this summation. So what this means is I'm taking the absolute value of stuff that happened, and then let's just say we're at I minus 2, so it's minus 2 times x n plus 2 plus h minus 1 times x n plus 1 plus, okay, and then that goes on. And we're taking the absolute value of that whole monstrosity. So there's an absolute value there as well. Okay. Now you'll have to think about this a little bit, but this is smaller than taking the sum of the absolute values of the individual stuff in here. Okay. So what I'm saying is that this is smaller than going tunk, 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 plus, and then the absolute value of h minus 2, I'll just take the absolute value of that times the absolute value of x n plus 2, okay, plus the absolute value of h minus 1 times the absolute value of x n plus 1, plus, and so on. Okay, now you need to stare at this to make sure that you see why this will always be bigger than this. The answer is actually pretty intuitive. So here what we have is we have some positive numbers, some negative numbers, some positive numbers, and so on. You add them all up, and then what you do is then you basically take the absolute value of that. So if it's negative, that becomes positive. What's going to happen inside here is some of these things are going to make the number a little bit smaller. Okay, so what you can do is, if you want an upper bound for this, is that you can say, well, first, before doing that, first just take the absolute value of all of the individual elements. Okay, they will all be positive, right? So none of them is going to take away any values from this absolute value. And so if I add up all these positive numbers, having taken the absolute values beforehand, that will always be bigger or equal to the absolute value of the sum. That's just the truth. Okay, so I can write this out. I can write the sum, this bound. I can write that out in a formula a little bit. And I can just say that's the same as, okay. So this is an upper bound for this. Okay, this thing will never be greater than that. It can be smaller. Okay, maybe this is going a little bit too far, but it can never be greater than this value. Okay, now for Bibo stability, what can you tell me about the input? Okay, so the input with Bibo stability is assumed to be smaller than some maximum value, mx, for all n. Okay? And so if this is true, then that means this thing is always smaller than or equal to mx. So this thing itself is capped by an upper bound. Okay, and that upper bound is hi, it's absolute value times mx. Awesomeness. Now what I can do is I can just take the mx out, and then I have hi. Okay, now the reason I do this is that for a system to be bibostable, this needs to be bounded. It needs to have an upper bound. This is an upper bound. It needs to have an upper bound that is some value, like, I don't know, 1,000,000 or 5, but not infinity. Okay. Now we've proven that this is an upper bound for this. Okay. This is some concrete value, 10, 1,000,000, whatever, some actual number that's not infinity. This can still be anything. For this to be an actual number, it means that this thing here needs to be less than infinity for the thing to be bibostable. If we sum up the impulse response, phi minus infinity to infinity, then the result that we get here must be less than infinity. Okay. What this means, you stated like a little bit more intuitively, is that the impulse response should be summable. I should be able to add up the impulse response and get an actual value. If that is true, if my impulse response is summable, get something that's not infinity, then this LTI system is bibostable. Okay, and then again, just written out with some nicer font than my handwriting, an LTI system is stable if its impulse response is summable. So if you have that equation. Okay, and from this you can actually show two interesting things. The one is that if this is true for impulse response, then it means that the impulse response goes to 0 as we go to infinity. Okay, so like a decaying exponential, something that is going down up to 0, but it's sampled, right? Okay, that is actually, even though this never reaches 0, it is actually summable. And you can clearly see this property, it's going to 0. And similarly, it can be shown that the output should go to 0 if your input has a finite duration. So if I apply some input to a system and I look at the end of time and this thing is bibostable, then the output should be close to 0, or should actually be 0 if I'm exactly at the end of time.